Hello and welcome to Cloud Native Security Everywhere, from Dev to Deploy. Today's webinar is sponsored by Kasten by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know if you have any technical issues. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in that Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. There's a technical insight report about Kasten K10, a best practices report on Kubernetes backup, and an Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide about storage and applications in Kubernetes Foundation Edition. Also, in that handout section, there's a link to the Guerrilla Guide Book Club and a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and your colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters, who I'm going to introduce in a minute. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. So let's get to today's great session. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Adam Berg, who's responsible for solution architecture and cloud native technical partnerships. And we have Joey Lay, principal product manager. So I'm going to turn things over to Adam to get us started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are doing cloud native security everywhere, from dev to deploy. My name is Adam Berg. I am with Kasten by Veeam, and I manage solution architectures and technical partnerships here at Kasten. And I'm with Mr. Joey Lay. Hi, Joey.
Adam, thanks. Great to be here. My name is Joey Lay. I'm one of the product managers at Kasten by Veeam. I lead our cloud native security strategy.
All right, let's get right into it. I want to just quickly start off with a little bit about who Kasten by Veeam is and what our mission statement is. So if you haven't heard of Kasten by Veeam, our mission is to tackle day-to-day data management challenges around Kubernetes. We're making organizations run Kubernetes confidently in production by delivering the best-in-class backup and recovery capabilities, best-in-class application mobility, being able to move applications between clusters, between clouds, between on-prem and public clouds, and of course, delivering full disaster recovery for Kubernetes and cloud-native-based applications. And why is this industry growing so quickly? I mean, Kubernetes is really powering the next generation of applications and application development. You know, just a few stats here from some of the leading analysts out there. You know, what they're saying is 500 million new apps are going to be deployed by 2024 on top of containerized applications. 85% of enterprises will be running containerized applications by 2025. And what's really interesting is only 52% of organizations right now are realizing that they need new backup tooling to protect this new generation of applications, these containerized applications. And what they're starting to realize is that legacy and traditional data protection methods don't generally apply anymore to this new paradigm of cloud native based applications, containerized applications, and applications managed in Kubernetes and Kubernetes data management. So what we're going to be going through today is showing you a bit about the security landscape and how we're taking this from dev to deploy to get you to confidently run production level Kubernetes. And when we say we're the number one Kubernetes backup, we're not just saying that ourselves. That's what the analysts are saying. As you can see, the latest GigaOM radar in this space, this just came out. This is brand new. This is showing where the analysts think Kasten resides, and they see us as the number one player in the space. We're the most mature. I think we've been around about 6 years now. We're just releasing version 5.0 of our product here this month, and we're really excited that the industry is recognizing our market leadership position. So let's go out there and be sure to check out Kasten K10 by Veeam when we're done after this presentation. So let's get right into it, Joey.
This is a security conversation, and the security conversation wouldn't be complete unless we're talking about how to manage risks. Risks come in all forms. They come in the form of disasters, and they come in the form of security incidents. And the challenges that we're really facing in our market these days, especially in cloud services, more and more of the incidents that require recovery operations and backup solutions are going to come from security incidents. So we come at a pivotal point where data management now intersects with risk management, because the adversaries out there are really targeting your crown jewels. They're targeting the data. And because of this, our data management solution needs to be extended to ensure the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of your data and your business applications. Now, historically, data protection has really focused only on the A, right? The availability of applications when we need it. But here at Kasten, we're focused on all three of these attributes: to protect the business apps, to store your customers' data, to deliver a great experience, and preserve your revenue stream that's essentially critical to your business. Right? And our customers have been asking us for help because they're facing very high financial and business impact. So today, we're going to talk to you about the Kasten K10 by Veeam Security Everywhere strategy, which offers our customers a full application lifecycle solution from development to deployment, and a full lifecycle solution. Now, first, we've hardened the K10 platform. It's become a critical spot for all of your data, and it's very important to make sure that the security of the K10 platform itself is not only easy to use and frictionless, but has the enterprise-grade hardening that you expect from a data management solution. So we have support for key management with AWS KMS and HashiCorp Vault. This allows the back encryption of backup data in the case of unauthorized exfiltration of your cloud buckets. We've also simplified the experience of authorizing admins to manage data management operations. Those can be very sensitive. If put in the wrong hands, an adversary could use the backup tool to exfiltrate data. So it's very important that we have the right level of authorization that follows least privilege. The second thing is that you might encounter a scenario where RBAC is just not enough, where we want to explicitly enforce or deny searching conditions and data protection objectives, or just preventing misconfigurations. And we call this the data protection policy guardrails. The third thing is that we've heard of many of you are concerned about ransomware in general. And one thing to know about this attack pattern is that it has a lot of layers. We all see the headlines, we all see the big ransom payments and the news of encryption events, but there's a lot that can be detected preceding that. And that's where we feel the industry and data management hasn't done enough to actually show those early warning signs and show the impending or potential attacks that are hitting your infrastructure, whether it's S3 or whether it's the backup infrastructure directly. And lastly, we know that many of you are Veeam customers. Right, you have large investments with the Veeam platform. We're furthering our integration in this case with the hardened Linux repository to support immutable backends, both on our object planes, but also on any Linux storage repository that you're using with your current Veeam investment. So let's dive right in and go deep into some of these capabilities and show you a few demos along the way. The first topic I want to talk about is called the guardrails. This is essentially how you harden access and authorization to K10 itself, the data management platform. And really that first key control that you need for any security conscious company is role-based access control. It's the essential first step to implementing a least privilege model. For example, you have admins on production, you have admins on protection. Maybe they're the same admin. If they are the same admin, you're going to want to provision access such that they can't delete production and they can't delete backups, because that would be violating a separation of trust. And you achieve this through an RBAC model. But one of the things about Kubernetes, and if you've provisioned Kubernetes RBAC specifically, it's a little bit of a complex experience. You have to use the API directly. You have to use command lines. It's not that pleasant. It's actually can be confusing to know who has authorization to delete certain resources. So for us, we've made an investment. We've simplified the experience of managing role-based access control by making it a simple experience in the K10 product. So let's quickly check out a demo of that functionality.
So here we have the Kasten interface, and we're going to walk you through the demo of configuring role-based access control. So let's go to settings and go to user roles, where we can find these settings. Here you can grant authorization of various K10 API permissions to very specific cluster-wide roles or namespaced roles. And you can assign these roles you define to existing users using something called role assignments, which implements the Kubernetes cluster role binding functionality. So let's start with API access. Here you can customize specific organization access policies to data management functions like backups, like recovery actions. And here you can see that the access privileges we grant you exactly match that of the K10 API. So for example, you can create access to actions to create backups to do recoveries, but also to do things like application migrations. You can customize the ability and who has access to application data and restore points. You can configure who has access to manage infrastructure policies and infrastructure configuration settings like profiles. You can also control who manages reports. And lastly, you can control who can manage encryption keys in the secure vault. And you can do so very simply by controlling the read, write, and delete access for each of these. And there's a very simple select all trigger, or you can select the individual access role that's needed. Once you've defined the roles that you want to see in the environment, you can also quickly audit who has access or which roles have access to which types of operations. So you might be a very security conscious customer and you don't want to have delete permissions on any of your roles because you don't want anybody deleting application backups or deleting very critical configuration profiles. You can quickly audit at a glance who has access to what, which would allow you to satisfy things like compliance or just general best practice security measures. Please note you're always going to have available to you the default roles such as K10 admin, K10 basic. These are defined in docs.kasten.io, and these are always going to be available to anyone. Now, if you want to assign specific roles to users or groups, you would do this on the role assignments. So if we go to new assignment here, you can see that you can make this a cluster-wide assignment, or you can make this a very specific namespace assignment. And here you can simply choose the roles that you created previously or one of the default roles to grant access to either a user or a group.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that demo. Now, RBAC is useful for when you need to authorize and delegate, right? It grants permissions to the K10 API resources. It grants ability to backup, to recover. But there are some situations where you might actually want to explicitly deny access. And this is more to do with meeting the right data protection objectives. This is what we call the policy guardrails. And how this is executed is through a technology called policy as code. What policy as code aims to solve is the problem of cloud misconfigurations. This might be basically a policy that says we should not have root privileges in all of our containers. We should not have this network exposed to this pod because it doesn't need to talk to it for the application traffic. Or we might want to enforce immutable backups in all cases because we have confidential data, we have sensitive data, which is a target for attackers, and we would be exposing ourselves to too much risk if we didn't back up to an immutable target. Now, our developers, our platform ops teams, they all understand the importance of backups, but how many of us can accurately and pinpoint precision configure in the right way? Well, you don't necessarily need to have everyone be a data protection expert. Policy as code is basically writing your objectives in code to enforce what you want to happen. In case in point, there's a very popular infrastructure as code platform which we won't name by name, but the community contributes a lot of automation, a lot of provisioning for different resources, in this case to this repo. And a study by Bridge Crew at the Prisma Cloud team just found that there's a lot of misconfigurations in that code. So if you just took that repo and that infrastructure as code from a repo and used it to deploy into production, you'd be incurring a lot of risk because it doesn't have backup. It might have the wrong permissions. It might have exposed network traffic that is too open, which can be a risk for lateral movement. And the reality is we should hold ourselves to a different standard. Backup should not be a second stage process in the deployment. It should be ready from day one. So let's check out a couple examples of how this guardrail exactly works. The first demo which we're going to show you is for the developer audience. And you might be already doing this process of what's called GitOps, where your infrastructure as code is checked into a Git repo, and it represents the source of truth, how infrastructure should be deployed, but also how your application should be deployed. Now, because Kasten K10 is Kubernetes native, you can take the same infrastructure as code and check that into your repo. But again, your developers may not be seasoned experts on data protection, but fortunately, there are probably experts on your team who can write specific policies that check for misconfigurations so that you can deploy consistently every single time from Git. And this is great for the dev first model because it gives you feedback on what exactly are the vulnerabilities being exposed by checking in these infrastructure resources well in advance of actually it hitting production, right? Catching it early before it hits a production scenario is really our philosophy. And this is very scalable, very powerful. You can integrate this kind of functionality directly into a CI platform like Jenkins or continuous deployment platform like the Argo project and Flux. So let's check out the demo and just see exactly how that works.
In this demo, we're going to show you a very quick example policy as code for data protection to test what's called the 3-2-1 backup policy. This is a very basic proof of concept policy that states you must have at least 3 copies of your data, 2 on different storage targets, and one of those copies being to an off-site location. So in this case, what we're looking for is in our Kasten K10 policy resources, we're looking for the condition that we have a backup action followed by an export action. What this translates to in Kasten K10 is a storage snapshot and then copying this snapshot to a location profile, which is typically a cloud object storage. How you'd set up this test for GitHub, for example, is you would drop in the same folder a file called kernel-test.yaml. And what this is doing is defining the policies that you want tested, the resources you want them to apply to, and the very specific test results. So it's almost like a unit test that you're coding for different resources you're checking into and different infrastructure as code you're checking into. The resource in this case is a Kasten policy. This is our sample policy where it shows the retention, the RPO. But in this case, I've introduced a bug to highlight an example misconfiguration that we might have if a developer is trying to create a new backup policy. So in this case, they're doing the action for the snapshot, and they're also doing an action for an export, but only in this case, it's commented out. So the following test of how to set this up in GitHub, for example, is I'm using GitHub Actions in this case. And in this GitHub Actions, we're triggering basically any pull request or any push to a test branch. We want to run this code. And what this code is doing is, first, it's checking out the repo to get the policies. It's pulling from a marketplace add-on called the Kernel test action. And then it's actually running the Kernel CLI to test the policies that you want to specify. And so I've accelerated, what happens here when a pull request happens and simulated this test here. So what GitHub Actions is actually doing is it's creating what's called a runner, where it's setting up likely a containerized environment to run the code you want specified. So here it is, it's setting it up, it's checking out the repo, it's setting up the Kernel test CLI by downloading the latest version, and then it's running the policy itself. And you can see here with that error I introduced, the policy check actually fails. And on pull request, this will actually show the developer some feedback saying, hey, the policy that you committed, the K10 backup policy that you committed, doesn't comply with our standard 321 policy. It doesn't have an export in that. And so this is just a great example where you can, fail fast and do the checks early to check for misconfigurations and ensure that we are protecting our production environments.
All right, now the second way to leverage this functionality is for the operators. Maybe the team isn't quite ready for a fully GitOps model, and that's okay. It's a journey for all of us. We have cloud operations, we have data protection specialists from our team. This model would be preferred for those that are a little bit more hands-on and are actually deploying into production using scripts, using things like Terraform, or just doing it manually through kubectl. And the guardrails here, in this case, they work in real time using something called the Kubernetes admission controller. And this can be very helpful for situations where you're concerned about adversaries getting real-time access to your node, or escalating their privileges and getting access to your containers, to your pods, or the clustered node itself. The admission controller will actually prevent bad behavior as it's reading and intercepting an API call coming in to say, hey, deploy my app, deploy my stateful set. It's going to read the YAML directly, read the API directly, and inspect the contents to make sure that it's complying to our policy itself. So that, an attacker might, for example, they might modify the location profile for Kasten. They might remove the immutability protections. And that can be quite stealthy, right? Backups are continuing. We're happy with our backup jobs running. But if that change happened in the background, it's not necessarily noticeable. And that can be something very dangerous in an attack like ransomware, where stealth is actually critical in the stages leading up to an encryption event. Let's see how this works exactly in a demo.
In this demo, we're going to use Kyverno again to demonstrate how to enforce the right behaviors for either an operations team member or a data protection specialist. And let's say that this person is responsible for deploying a WordPress application, one with stateful data, and it requires us to first deploy an Nginx web server. The policy that we're looking here is an example that is looking for a label called purpose, where a developer might have said that this manifest is designed for production use. And upon finding that label, we're going to look for a second label called data protection, which looks for a named policy that starts with K10. If it doesn't find this label in the manifest itself, it's actually going to reject the deployment of that Nginx server and associated WordPress application. So here's an example of an invalid policy that's misconfigured. It has the right purpose. It says it's for production use, but it's not using a valid named K10 data protection policy, where it says none. Here's a correctly configured Nginx deployment where it's got the purpose production and it's specifying one of the already preset K10 gold policies, which is our highest level of standard for data protection services. Now let's go to the terminal and actually try to deploy both of these and see what happens. So we can see here that there was an error, that the API server has basically said through the admission controller, we're not allowed to deploy this deployment. It does not have a K10 name, and essentially this rejects deployment of this configuration. Now, if we try the same thing to deploy the correctly configured deployment, we can see here that it was successful and it did not find any violations. Now, this is a very powerful policy that you can also associate in Kyverno what's called a generate policy. And a generate policy is as you would think. Upon matching a resource that comes into the API server, whether it's a deployment, whether it's a stateful set, and that it has the right matching data protection policy, the gold policy, we're going to go ahead and generate this associated resource, which is a K10 policy, which has the right RPO, has the right retention policy, has the right 321 backup and export, but most critically important is backing up to the right location profile, one that's using S3 object lock to provide immutable backups. So let's see what happened when we did that deployment we go top into our K10 instance, we can see that a new policy has shown up. And in fact, it generated a policy for that Nginx application. So you can see here that the power of enforcement can also mean we can control the right exact behavior of what we want deployed into the environment.
I hope you like that demo, and we're going to continue the flow and move on to our next topic, which is really squarely focusing on ransomware attack detection. Right? We showed you how in the developer side process and the deployment side process, how you can protect yourself from threats like ransomware. Now that we should be let's move on to the runtime, right? In production, in real time, how can you protect yourself from ransomware attack?
Now, Joey, I want to talk to you a little bit about the costs of ransomware. I think people fundamentally have an understanding that ransomware attacks can be extremely costly. In fact, tens of millions of dollars to even hundreds of millions of dollars in some attacks. But it's not just the immediate cost of the extortion, right? What are some of the other costs that are, like the collateral damage or the collateral costs of ransomware that organizations really need to be thinking about when they're sort of calculating the total cost of a ransomware?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that, Adam, because the one thing that we see in the headlines, we see it, the huge ransom payments and the fact that people are paying the ransom payments, and it seems like an anomaly, but actually you find it's quite logical. We talked about this as called the iceberg. On the surface of what we hear in the news is the top of the iceberg. We see, a small, vertical thing that might sink our ship, and that's the ransom payment. What we kind of don't see is what's under the sea level, which is the entire stealth attack that are the events prior to an incident. And actually, because that iceberg is much larger underneath the surface, there are actually a lot more collateral costs that a lot of people, a lot of organizations don't see in the media that you need to be concerned about if you think ransomware is a threat to your organization. So if you've never experienced ransomware, you're fortunate. But if you're intent on avoiding paying the ransom in case of an incident, there's a lot to learn here. So to help make this more clear, there's a study that from threat researchers at a cybersecurity firm called Checkpoint analyzed the costs of several incidents across different industries and made an attempt to calculate what are the collateral costs in addition to the ransom payment. And what you'll find here is the calculations that these threat researchers are using is the same calculation the adversary is using to figure out your willingness to pay. And your willingness to pay is a percentage of total revenue. Because what they're looking for is they want a ransom payout. They're also looking for revenue, to put it in another way. And they don't want to put a cost that's so high that you're just going to automatically reject. They want to make a ransom payment sizable enough for it's attractive for them to implement an attack strategy, but also that you can absorb that cost. And a lot of companies nowadays, they have cyber insurance. So they know that the majority of these costs can be covered by cyber insurance. But we don't want to leave it to that, right? There's still a lot of damage that can be done that insurance just won't cover. And those are things like the unavailability of your services, which has direct revenue impact, especially in the case of service providers or SaaS offerings, or just plain, education services, for example. There's a cost. There's also a very high opportunity cost. Remediation, fixing vulnerabilities, recovery operations, all of those resources could be better spent building your business, to serving your customers better. But unfortunately, when incidents happen, we have to rotate them back into actually restoring the business back to its original state. And that has a high opportunity cost. The other growing concern that has been more prominent and more vocal from our customers is the risk of extortion. And ransomware and exfiltration combined, it's what's known as the double extortion event. You're being extorted in the case of the unavailability of your services, but you're also being extorted in the potential leakage of your data. The other loss that really is encountered is typically brand or equity loss. We all can recall an incident where bad publicity, media exposure, even a small breach can cause a lot of damage in stock prices, equity prices, or just the overall reputation of the company. We've heard of those, and those have very high dollar figures. So what turns out is that the ransom payment, it's a percentage of all these costs, and it's sized strategically so that it makes financial sense to actually pay the ransom unless you have a proper recovery strategy and a proper detection and response strategy. Right, so let's talk about that. One thing you may not have known about Kubernetes is that the attacks are growing in general. It's not just ransomware that's facing Kubernetes applications, right? There's other attacks like cryptojacking. There's certainly data exfiltration going on. And we need to start detecting more of these attacks up front, right? Not waiting for an incident to happen, even though we have the ability to recover from it. So we started to build out a solution that looks at the ransomware attack pattern in greater depth, and we want to raise visibility and detect the evasive, stealthy attacks such as lateral movement, such as data collection, such as exfiltration, and of course, the encryption of data due to ransomware. But the thing about this pattern is very difficult to detect all stages of this attack, and it's essentially a full system compromise type of pattern. So fortunately at Kasten, we have a lot of visibility to the prime targets, the backup data and the data that your applications are using to service customers. And to help you avoid costs associated with extortion, with the unavailability of services, with the churn of customers, there are two ways that we look to detecting attacks that lead up to the ransomware event, which is the destruction of backup data where it lives. So what we do here, without giving away too much of how it works, we inspect the S3 bucket and note that this feature is supported on top of object lock S3 buckets. We inspect it to look for suspicious tampering. And it can be used primarily as a forensics feature to figure out, hey, was there a breach and what exactly happened and what kind of data was tampered? Because the last thing we want to know is somebody trying to exfiltrate or tamper the data itself. We're fully protected because of immutability, but the idea behind this is you want to know if somebody's trying to knock on the door of that object bucket. The second capability is something related to the Kubernetes audit log. Because Kasten's API is an extension of the Kubernetes audit log, we can, in real time, detect who's trying to access backup data. So these are get commands, these are restore commands, they're even deletion commands. And we can monitor the audit log with community open source tools to detect in real time who is trying to read the backups to exfiltrate data, or who's just trying to compromise the system by completely deleting and wiping it out. Right, so let's check out a demo of just how that works.
All right, so this is a quick demonstration on how to perform attack detection on the common ransomware pattern. Up here, I've got the Kasten UI up on the right. I've got my handy terminal, this is hands-on keyboards for an attacker. And on the left here, I have the Falco dashboard. This is a helpful sidekick utility that's used to display a real-time live stream of events that I want detected. And the pattern for this attack, what we're going to do is we're going to say that somebody has compromised access to K10. Maybe they phished an admin and the account has now been compromised, and now that they have unrestricted access to the Kasten UI. First thing what I would do here if I were an adversary is that I would look to see what applications do I now have access to. And you can see here that now we have access to namespaces. And let's just say that this ends to the web server that supports our front-end GUI. And we want to disrupt that front-end GUI because it serves revenue-generating activity. We can go ahead here and look at the restore points just to see what we have available. So you can quickly see here that once the adversary has already started looking up and discovering data, you can see these events pop up in almost near real time. Or you can see we've written the detection to basically be aggressive in detecting what we want to see. So this is an attack where somebody's performing discovery and they're looking for the restore points to see just how protected this application is. Now let's say that they are happy with what they see and they want to now destroy these backups because they're preparing for a ransomware attack. I would go to my hands-on keyboard here. And let's say I'm familiar with the Kasten API. I would go ahead and list all the restore points in that application namespace. In here, we can see we have one such restore point. We're going to go ahead and delete that restore point. We'll pop back into our Falco UI here. And we can see here that the Falco has actually detected those events. So this was the discovery command run by my Minikube user here, followed by a deletion coming from our Minikube username targeting the Nginx application. And that's it for this demonstration. All right. So hope you enjoyed that demo. The next topic I want to talk to you about is about hardening the platform. Right. So we've shown that K10 has a comprehensive solution from development to runtime. We're going to show you more capabilities about how you should be thinking about your platform and involving that structure. For those of you who dabble in cryptocurrency in the Web3 world, you might have heard a saying that says, not your keys, not your crypto. And this is a play on words and the fact that if you don't manage the encryption's private keys to your wallet, you technically don't own your cryptocurrency, right? It's either with a custodian or a service provider or a cloud service. But the same can be said about your data's ownership, right? If you don't manage the private keys directly, technically someone else owns access to your data. And in the case of ransomware, that's how the attack works. They encrypt your data with a private, and they keep the private key to themselves, and they technically own your data. They're holding it hostage. So it's very important to consider maybe we should be owning our own data and managing our own keys. Now K10, because it's a public cloud, it's a cloud model, we've always encrypted data. By default, we manage the keys for you. But in some cases, you might want to take ownership of those keys by using a key management system. So we support AWS, KMS, we support HashiCorp Vault. And the scenarios you might want to think about this in this case are you consuming K10 as a backup service, with a service provider or a partner Veeam? Are you using the storage target that's hosted by, a cloud provider, a colo, or some other hosted provider where, you've delegated access strategically to manage the infrastructure? You may want to consider owning the keys yourself with your own key management system so that you control who has access to your data.
So I want to talk a little bit now, Joey, with you about the Veeam ecosystem. I know that Veeam it has a lot of customers out there. I think there's probably over 400,000 customers out there. So how is K10 itself working within the Veeam ecosystem? So let's go over that a little bit. So I think it was in version 9.5 or 10 that Veeam released something that they called the Veeam hardened Linux repository. The idea around the Veeam hardened Linux repository was to have a local, self-controlled, on-prem, hardened, malware-safe, ransomware-safe repository for your backup data. Now, with the K10 capability to integrate with Veeam backup and replication repositories, we can now take advantage of the Veeam hardened Linux repository with immutability. So the way that this works is we can leverage your existing Veeam investments to support those on-premises hardened repositories, protecting against not only external threats like we've talked about, external ransomware, but also malicious insiders, or more commonly accidental deletion, accidental corruption of data can be prevented as well with these hardened Linux repositories. It's easily set within the Veeam backup and replication console. You set your immutability window within there, set the corresponding protection period within K10, and you configure your retention policy to match, and that's it. Now we can leverage the Veeam backup and replication hardened Linux repository for on-premises now hardened repositories. So keep everything under your in control. Some organizations want to keep the data within their own data centers. Maybe they're matching some compliance and regulations that they have to, where they have to control the data and understand where the data is. This is a great opportunity to take advantage of those existing resources. And finally, let's just talk about the K10 platform. We just want to reiterate that security everywhere is part of the platform, from dev to development. So the 3 stages here, from development to deployment to restore, from coding and building, from those policy as code engines that we talked about with OPA and Kyverno, to CI testing with Jenkins and something like Canister, all the way through the development stages, from staging to running, RBAC controls, detecting attacks in the backup, and then all the way at the restore layer, from a recovery standpoint, from key encryption and disaster recovery with immutability. You can trust that the K10 platform is there from the beginning to end, with security as a #1 key goal and key concept in mind from your data protection vendor. It should be paramount, and it is. You can rely on Kasten as the #1 most mature product in the space to have you covered, again, from dev to development in the security space. We understand that this is a big ecosystem, and also with that comes with the peace of mind that whatever infrastructure that you're standardizing on, whatever cloud platform you're standardizing on, whatever Kubernetes distribution you're standardizing on, whatever application layers you're standardizing on, K10 has the largest partner ecosystem and validated solution ecosystem in the industry today. You can be confident that the infrastructure that you choose today or the Kubernetes distribution you choose today, you're not locked in. We're a vendor agnostic and vendor neutral technology, and you can be confident that we can support you no matter what software from an infrastructure layer standpoint, or Kubernetes layer you choose, and all the way into the application layer. We're creating consistency points all the way from the top of the stack, all the way to the bottom of the stack, with our security partnerships guaranteeing the availability of your data from dev all the way to deployment. And with that, I want to thank Joey, and we want to leave you with this. We are giving back to the community with our learning platform. That is learning.kasten.io. You can go there today to get free Kubernetes training. This is live Kubernetes training on real Kubernetes clusters. This is not YouTube videos. This is not PowerPoint. Go to our learning platform at learning.kasten.io. Interact with real Kubernetes clusters. We take you through the journey of deploying your first Kubernetes cluster, deploying your first applications, and then learning about the security of those applications, protecting those applications along the way, and learning about the underlying storage, encryption, and immutability of your applications to protect those. And you can get free certifications and badges along the way as well. And don't forget about free Kasten K10. Try out our product today at kasten.io/try-kasten-K10. Again, my name is Adam Berg with Kasten by Veeam. And Joey, you want to say some final words?
Absolutely. So keep in mind that we're here for you, and we know that it's a challenging world out there, but we want you to be confident that when you're building your most strategic applications on the Kubernetes platform, you have a partner that you can trust to help you confidently get there. Again, my name is Joey Lay. I'm a principal product manager at Kasten by Veeam.
And thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks for that thought-provoking presentation. I especially found that slide about the collateral cost of ransomware enlightening, and the demos were really clarifying. All right, Adam and Joey, are you guys ready for some polls and some audience questions?
All right, let's do it.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We do have this first poll up here, and the question there is, in the next 12 months, what type of operational model will you use for provisioning data protection? And anything that you guys want to say about the options up there on that poll as people are filling that out?
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to see here is just where is everyone in their journey. We do come out strong with a message that GitOps is how you would deploy the right environment every single time, right? Because machines are very consistent in how they deploy infrastructure, where sometimes the humans, we make mistakes, and it's part of being human. So, and that's good that we see a few folks are primarily GitOps in this case. Not surprising that the majority of us are data protection specialists. Maybe if you're on this call, that's our main role. But definitely consider how you would deploy your protection and your backup policies using infrastructure as code, whether you're using Kubernetes or not. There's plenty of solutions out there, like Terraform, for example, to write code to deploy backups. It's something I think we will help with agility as well. So backups is normally a day 2 operation. You deploy your infrastructure, you deploy your app, you're in production, and then you separate backups, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I just did put up the results there for everybody to see. Just the 53% on the data protection specialists, 34% on the cloud ops, and 11% on the GitOps. There's one more poll question. Why don't we go ahead to that one? In your current state, what is likely to cause the most impact to your business? And so the options up there: exfiltration of sensitive data, destruction of mission critical data, inability to service end user customers following a ransomware incident. So those are the options on that.
This one's interesting, and I kind of wish this was a multiple choice one right here, because I think most people might even they should kind of be worried about all three. In most cases, right? Obviously, data is the lifeblood of most organizations these days, and destruction of mission critical data, especially getting that data back, would, in my mind, be probably one of the worst things that can happen to most businesses these days.
We're right in saying that these 3 things are on the top of a lot of folks' mind, but the question was intentional. If we can just show the result for the audience here.
Okay. Yep.
So
business
impact is certainly business impact is certainly what we're after here, and how we look at our roadmap of where we need to focus the major pains. Right. This gives us an intentional choice of how we would build out our product to defend against ransomware. There's so many layers. Most of you have said that the unavailability of your core services, which affects revenue, which affects brand reputation and loyalty, sounds like that's the most highest level of concern. So that pushes us to have a much more automated recovery experience. Maybe we need instant recovery. Maybe we need disaster recovery and failover. Whereas for the other 2 solutions, those are things preceding the encryption event, and those are more related to detection, right? So they're just different solutions that are needed to address these particular problems. Ideally, yes, we have all 3, but in terms of urgency, what I was looking to figure out was just how urgent are these particular pain points.
Yep. Yeah, and there was Glenn from the audience noted that all of the above, to the point that you were making there. Yeah. And so just a quick reminder to everybody, there is an opportunity, don't be shy about asking your questions, because there is an opportunity to win a gift card for the best question. But, this first one I wanted to ask, is Kasten becoming a security company? You come out of data management, but what's happening there?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I know this topic is on cybersecurity, but the fact is that Kasten is going to be there for your security, for data management purposes, something we call app mobility, data protection, so that it can be restored in an availability event. But we're not becoming a security company. Security is a key feature of our product and platform. And our strategy around cybersecurity is to partner with the platforms you're already using. So in our roadmap, coming out, I can't share too many details. I can share the broad strokes. We're investing in integrations with security cloud native platform communities, because those are the central monitoring, those are the central reporting, those are the governance tools you're using for not just data security threats, but network security, application threats, user threats, identity threats. Alert fatigue is real, and we don't want to have too many places for alerts. So I remember seeing a question about alerting and where do these alerts actually show up. Our intention is to drive alerting through the central SOC platforms, because that's where the 24/7 team is actually monitoring today.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, so you heard it here first, some roadmap details. So tremendous. The next one, Stephen had asked about whether you support MFA in the context of the privileged admin option. And Joey, I know you answered him in the chat, but do you want to talk about that a bit in case anybody missed that response, or if there was anything you wanted to add?
Which question was it?
It was the one about the support for MFA in the privileged admin
Right.
option.
Yeah, so we support a variety of authentication. Yeah, we support a variety of authentication protocols. It's a little bit of a build it yourself. So if you want to implement MFA to K10, for example, you can use the OIDC protocol, which is supported by things like Duo or other MFA providers.
Okay. All right, great. There's a question from Robert about HIPAA compliance. Is that something that's applicable to what you guys do, and is that something you support?
So HIPAA compliance
tell me more.
is
so HIPAA is a variety of things.
Yeah. I was going to say, really, it's Kasten K10 is a tool, and the HIPAA compliance is really up to the owners of the data to comply with the policies. So there's certainly many healthcare providers. Veeam in general has a massive healthcare support staff and customer base, and obviously HIPAA compliance is a major part of that, and using tools like Veeam to comply with all standard regulations is fully supported here. But again, we're just a tool. You can use us to comply with all standard regulations that apply to your type of data in your organization. So that's absolutely one of them.
Okay, super. This next question comes from Ken, and it looks like he was keying on that same slide, Joey, that I was, just about the sort of the collateral damage and ransomware. He's wondering how might implementing your platform be used to decrease cybersecurity insurance?
So the way we like to think about it is there's no silver bullet for cybersecurity solutions. It's certainly a defense in depth strategy, and that involves technical solutions like ours, but also financial solutions, right? So insurance shouldn't be a substitute necessarily for a recovery solution, and vice versa. They should work in conjunction. So if the cost of insurance is the pain point here, and there's an ability to kind of show that insurance provider, say, hey, we've implemented an automated DR plan that reduces our human hour costs, that might offer ability to discount the cyber insurance. I haven't looked at specific insurance policies, but just kind of thinking through it logically. You can show them how our product provides more automation, less human hours required to restore from downtime.
Excellent. Okay. Here's another compliance question. We have strict compliance to store data for 7 years. How do I enforce that with policy as code?
Yeah, actually, that might be applicable to the HIPAA question. So if there's a compliance requirement that says, we need all patient records to be stored for 7 years, it's very expensive to store that in a production storage array. You can push that data to backup. But if you're a developer first org or you don't have specialists on your team, they may not know that requirement. They may just use the default 30-day backup. So the policy as code not only can it enforce, it can do something called mutation, which it actually changes the policy to what you want it to be. And you can actually automatically set it to use 7 years by default.
Interesting. Did you say mutation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is something that most policy engines support. So it's enforcement auditing for just visibility, or something we call mutation.
Yeah, tremendous. Okay, great. Next question: if you're already protecting data, why do you need detection?
It goes back to the defense in depth comment again. Protection is really the first thing, obviously, that many of us will want. We want to prevent threats before they even become problems. But the attackers are notorious at disabling protection defenses. In the case of immutability, there are ways to circumvent, which I won't get into, but it's very difficult to do that. So a detection strategy is sort of a fail-safe. In case that protection is disabled, detection actually tells you what's going on. In the case we've prevented attacks, it can also tell you, again, what's going on. And that's helpful for awareness and response.
Okay, super. And And Ken found the answer about the cybersecurity insurance helpful. So thanks for that, and thanks for letting us know, Ken. And with that, I think we've gotten through most of the questions here, and we're almost up on time. So, I know you guys gave some closing thoughts a minute ago. So, anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention, or anything about getting started with the platform?
Yeah, one more time, I just want to reiterate, please visit.
Thanks, here for listening.
Yeah, and please visit our learning site, learning.kasten.io, where you can get started on your learning journey if you're new to Kubernetes.
All right, super. Learning.kasten.io. Okay, great. Well, thanks Joey, and thanks Adam for putting together a really informative presentation and for all your insights here in the Q&A. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And finally, it's time for the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing, and the winner of that gift card is Rudy Regalado from Texas. Congratulations to Rudy. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Kasten by Veeam for making this event possible. And thanks, as always, for attending and for all your great questions during the Q&A portion. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.